Welcome back to Beyond Well. I'm so excited to be talking with Ashley Sproul today. Ashley works as a certified peer specialist at a program called The Living Room with Advocates. It's a peer-staffed drop-in crisis alternative in Framingham, Massachusetts. She's also a person who has lived experience navigating the mental health system, and she's utilized all types of clinical and peer support. You know, what's wonderful for me, Ashley, is to have someone with the breadth of your experience who's 27 years old. So you bring a really interesting perspective to the conversation. Thanks for joining us, first of all.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So someone told me Framingham, Mass. is like the place to go if you're struggling with any kind of mental illness because it's so progressive and so forward. Would you agree with that?
I do. It's actually funny. The agency I work for, I used to receive services from them, so it's been really great to kind of come full circle and actually provide care from the place that I received care. And I have to agree, Massachusetts is such a great place if you're not feeling well or if you need any type of support. Massachusetts has just been so good to me, and Framingham has been the hub of my recovery.
Yeah.
So I would definitely agree with that.
Well, can you talk to me a little bit in the traditional mental health system? What would you have been diagnosed with? What were the symptoms and what were you struggling with?
Yeah, so my official diagnoses were mostly post-traumatic stress disorder due to trauma in my childhood. It definitely kind of came to a head when I was a teenager, and it just kind of spiraled from there. So after bouncing around the state to different places, I did end up in Framingham with Advocates, and that's when I started to get well and be able to kind of address some of the trauma and deal with the diagnoses as they came up. So definitely I'd say PTSD is my main diagnosis. Depression and anxiety too.
Yeah. So talk to me about the framework of the Living Room with Advocates. Is it a physical place or is it just people who get together or who come to you?
Right. So the Living Room is actually a physical program. It's located at 284 Union Avenue in Framingham, and it's a crisis drop-in. So our mission is to be able to provide an alternative for those in crisis. So typically when people are struggling, they might end up at the emergency room or in an emergency respite or the hospital. So our goal is to be able to offer people an alternative to that. So we'll have people come by who are just struggling. We've had people who are feeling, suicidal, and it's staffed by peer specialists. So everybody who works there identifies as having some type of lived experience in their life with mental health or the system. And we just use our lived experience to sit with people and listen to them and just give them an alternative if they don't want to go down the emergency department route. And the way that we work is that people can just drop in at any time. We're open 24/7. So it's just like a nice place where people can chillax, hang out. It's a house, so we have, regular furniture and a TV and a kitchen. So it's just meant to be kind of a low-key place where people can kind of come in if they're not wanting to go down the more emergency route. So it's a pretty cool place.
It sounds amazing because so often people who are undergoing these kind of mental health pressures are also having housing pressures. How do you keep the Living Room from turning into a halfway house?
And I think that's something that people have asked a lot. Kind of the way we see it is, yes, we do have homeless people knocking on the door, and obviously we're not a shelter, not a respite, so we do tell people that we're not a long-term housing solution.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is just sitting with people when they come in and saying, like, hey, what's going on with you? Is housing something that you're struggling with? So we actually have a binder of resources for places like shelters, other respites, other housing resources, and we just kind of walk with the person and try to help them figure out where they next want to go. And you'd actually be really surprised. We really haven't had any issues with people kind of relying on us for housing. It's actually pretty good how well people understand the model and understand that we can't house them long term, but we do actively engage with the person to try to help them find their next steps ahead.
That's incredible.
So we do have people over, but it's not as hard as you would think to keep it from happening.
And how do you cope with people who are in active psychosis that might be acting out violently or having really traumatic voices or the kind of experiences that so often in emergency rooms end up having people get medicated very heavily?
And again, it's actually pretty interesting how much that does not happen.
Wow.
When people come in, we kind of give them their entrance agreement. We give them the guidelines of what we do and kind of what we expect from people coming into the space. But I think with those high expectations, people really rise to meet them. So we haven't had any situations where people are violent or struggling. And if someone's coming in with things like experiencing voices or other phenomenon like that, like I said, we're all peer specialists. So a lot of people on staff have lived experience dealing with those types of, voices, things like that. So a lot of it is just sitting down and talking with people and letting them know that, they're safe here and we can sit with them and walk them through it. But it really is shocking how much we have not had to deal with that.
Isn't that interesting? Just changing the setting and having somebody who actually has lived experience, having that kind of patience and understanding what a difference in the almost the pressure cooker of this kind of situation, how it changes it. So you talked about your use of open dialogue. I want to know what open dialogue means to you and how your family got involved with it.
So open dialogue is a very, I kind of want to say a beautiful model of therapy, because I think with open dialogue, the focus is the fact that there isn't one person who's to blame, right? So I think with open dialogue, the focus is on network. So when somebody comes in who's the person of concern with open dialogue, everybody in the networks, whether it be family, friends, other providers, doctors, whoever, everybody's on an equal playing field. So it's not like I'm coming in, I'm the person who's having a problem, so now we have to focus on how to fix Ashley. The model is more focused on how do we come together as a community, as a group, and share this pain, share what's happening, and also all voices are respected in the space. So it really brings it back down to a level where everybody's in the same boat and the same spot, and it removes the power differentials. So with my family, through all the trauma and things that have happened, what we'd come across is we'd be in family therapy, and there was always somebody to blame. Either I was the person that was causing problems in the family, or my parents weren't good parents, or, it was always somebody was wrong. But the reason why we loved open dialogue and why it worked for us is that we finally felt like we were in a safe place where everybody's feelings in the room mattered and nobody was being blamed. So we became, once I was in services with advocates and, they knew about the trauma and the things that had happened in our family. So it was suggested to us that we try to do open dialogue as they thought the model would kind of work a little better based on the supports that we've had in the past. And once we tried it, we loved it, and it did wonders for our family. We have not had such success in traditional family therapy models. So open dialogue was huge for us.
Can you explain the difference between the traditional family therapy model and what open dialogue accomplished for you?
Right. So I think with open dialogue, again, like I mentioned, it's all about the network. So what's interesting about open dialogue is there's almost always two facilitators. And we call them facilitators instead of just therapists, because the facilitator is the one that step back and let the family or the network kind of interact with each other and kind of do it in front of them. And what they'll do is once they witness an interaction, they might stop the therapy and reflect to each other saying, hey, I noticed that when Ashley said this, her mother looked like she got a little tense. And so they'll make these observations while we're in the room. And then us as the family have the choice to either address the reflection that the facilitators just made, or we can just move on.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of it is just witnessing us interact, and then the facilitators kind of take more of an observatory role and just notice things, and then we have the choice to kind of interact with each other. So it's different in the sense that a lot of times with traditional family therapy, there's the therapist, and they sit there and they, will talk and ask questions and everything. But I think the focus was really on trying to repair the relationships within the family. So a lot of it was just us talking to each other, and the facilitators had a lot of a smaller role in a session. So I think that's one of the reasons why our family healed so well, is because we finally were given the opportunity to talk to each other and get the things out that we needed to say to each other.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, Ashley, how in family therapy, the therapist can often be seen as siding with one person or another. And so it really pits the therapist in an unpleasant situation when there isn't the ability for the family to take these issues and go ahead and sort of take them on their own, right? Which is what you're describing. That's really amazing. Can you give me a specific example of one thing that you'd struggled with in your past with your family that you were able to work out because of the way that this model framed it for you?
Right. So I think for me, with my trauma, not to get too much into it, but there was abuse within the family. And of course, with that, we all love each other very much. So whenever there is trauma, it's harder to work through because you love everybody in the room. So with those hurt feelings, there was a lot of trying to, express how we all felt about the situation without necessarily attacking each other. So I think with that model, it was really amazing for me to be able to see my parents open up and be able to express how they felt about everything that happened. Because in traditional family therapy, oftentimes it was like, oh, your parents are to blame for letting this happen,
right.
or Ashley, you're to blame for not handling this well.
Yeah.
But with open dialogue, for the first time, I think my parents felt free to say, this is how I feel. And their feelings were just as important as mine in the room. And so I think with open dialogue, it really freed up that opportunity where my parents could feel like they were safe enough to say how they felt.
Wow.
And so I think with that specific example, it just was amazing to see the growth of those who typically did not feel like they could speak what they felt. So that's just one of many examples of that model really working for us versus other models.
If people are hearing this today, Ashley, and are like, wow, I really need that for my family, how widespread are the programs? How able are you to find people who are skilled in facilitating open dialogue across the country?
Yeah, so it's actually funny that you asked that because open dialogue is just kind of starting to hit the ground in the U.S. So I think Advocates, as far as I know, is one of the only agencies that has a full open dialogue team and program. So I cannot speak to as much as how many other places, because I just don't think there aren't many. I think there are some agencies that are kind of dabbling and trying to adopt some aspects of the model, but I do believe that Advocates is one of the only places that has a full exercising team.
Yeah,
so you can definitely look up Advocates and try to look for some resources that way.
How are things in your family now, and what have some of the long-term effects of the open dialogue model been for you and your family?
I cannot tell you how awesome it's been. I think that, again, there was a lot of hurt and pain within our family over many years trying to work that out. And I have to say that we're closer than ever. I don't like to, advertise things. I don't want to, talk about things if it's not something that I personally benefited from. But I do believe open dialogue saved our family. And what's cool now is that, say, if there's an issue or interpersonal stuff that comes up between family members, we've learned the tools where we know how to talk to each other about it.
Yeah.
And we've learned that all of our voices in a family, we're a family, and we have to work together. So I think those skills of learning how to acknowledge all voices in the room and nobody's all right and nobody's all wrong, it's been amazing growth in our family that we can actually talk about what's going on, and we actually don't meet as often for open dialogue anymore because we've learned those skills.
Wow.
But things have been really, really great.
That is so cool.
Really nice to say.
I want to just talk to you because you have had such a profound experience with the mental health system, and now you live in a much more progressive part of the country where it's kind of idyllic, really utopian. But if you could say to people who are struggling, especially those who are listening, who might have kids who are struggling or a partner who is struggling, what's some of the tenets of things that you think are really important for real recovery? What would they be, Ashley?
Oh, I could talk for hours about this. I think for me, the first thing is establishing that blame almost never works. I think especially if a family is interested in working together and kind of moving through a person of concerns, distress, I think a lot of it is making sure that the people know you're not alone and we're not going to abandon you. But I think establishing that blame is not going to work. So if someone, say a partner or an adult child is struggling, it would be, so how can we come together as a family or a network and support this person? Because for me, a huge part after especially the trauma that I experienced, it was a lot of feeling like I didn't belong, that I was causing problems for my family and everybody would be better off without me. And it wasn't until people came together and really established this, never-ending patience of network that we're not going to abandon you and we're going to get through this together. That was the turning point for me. And I also think, too, that sometimes these things take time. I think if you love somebody and they're struggling, it can be really hard to wait for that to
Exactly.
change.
Right. Yeah.
For me, it was a 10-year journey. I struggled from high school all the way up until recently. And so I think there were a few people in my life who just probably thought, when is this ever going to change? And it took a long time, but it did change. And so I think having that hope for people that everyone, no matter the diagnosis, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what happened to them, everybody has the ability to be well and to reach that path of recovery in their own time. So I think never-ending patience and the establishment of community and abolishing blame really were three key things for me.
I love that. I'm gonna write those down right now because I think that's key in almost any relationship, whether the person is suffering or not suffering. In order for any relationship to work, you have to abide by those three tenets. So why not for people with mental health problems? Ashley, it's so wonderful to talk with you, and you sound so optimistic and so, especially I've always told my friends who have kids, young kids that are going through a mental health struggle, that the skills that they learn as they come into their own are going to be with them for the rest of their life. And I think that's really apparent with you right now, that everything that you worked on, all of that, those incredible skills you worked so hard to save your own life with, are now going to be out there in the community for other people who are struggling, which is incredible. So thanks for your work.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, Ashley's a certified peer specialist at a program called The Living Room with Advocates.
Thank you so much for having me.
You
It's been
bet.
great.